My name's Bill Lang. I'm the Executive Director of Small Business Australia, and I'm delighted that you've been able to join us on this very important topic, not just for those of us that are business owners with respect to our business, but in terms of helping our employees and in terms of all of us that are involved with families, helping members of our families and our relatives with some of the major challenges that this whole area of online criminal activity is putting in front of us. With respect to our guests today, and I'm just absolutely delighted that we're joined by three absolute experts in this field, and we won't be able to cover everything in the 45 to 50 minutes that they'll be presenting for, and we'll have about 10 minutes at the end for questions. But we're going to really be able to get deep insights on the major things that we need to be aware of. Secondly, as of today, Small Business Australia has a website called Screen Smarts Online, and there's additional information, free resources to enable you to learn more about these important topics and put in place action plans to be able to protect the things that are most important to you. But we're joined by Tara Danakota from PEXA. PEXA is the Property Exchange of Australia, involved in the biggest transactions that really take place with respect to most of us, and that is the buying and selling and mortgaging of property. And it's fantastic, Tara, that you and your organisation is supporting Small Business Australia, but great to have you here, given your role as the Head of Information Security Management. Laura Hartley from National Australia Bank. We all know NAB, 30,000 plus employees around the world, 5 million plus customers, involved every minute of the day in helping people deal with the challenges of online criminal activity. And Laura was only just telling our team that last month, 200 webinars were delivered by her team at NAB to both employees and business owners and further employees more broadly. So, Laura, great to have you here. And Sarah Mercer, who's the co-founder and Chief Digital Design of arguably the safest and best fun online game for children called Town Squared. So, Sarah, we're really rapt that you could be here with us, given that you've been involved in designing games and apps for children and educators, for more than 15 years. So with respect to a quick overview of the content, we're going to get a really good sense and get Laura to lead us through an understanding of the online criminal industry. And I'm very deliberately using the word criminal. Often we talk about cyber and sort of online scams and those sorts of things, but at the heart of this, we're talking about very big organized criminal syndicates around the world that are very good at what they do. And we need to be aware of that, as well as what the impact is. We're going to quickly look at the most common threats and weaknesses that exist, whether you're at home or whether you're in the workplace or whether you're motoring around and being mobile. So when you're basically often dealing with your phone or dealing with your laptop, you might be hotspotting. So, what are the big ones that are most commonly getting experienced? We'll have a good look, and this part of it will certainly get led by Tara around, well, what can we do? Practically, what can we do? This stuff can be quite technical, can be quite overwhelming, but there are a number of practical things to do to strengthen your defences at work and in the workplace, at home, and then when you're on the move. Importantly, there are things to do when you get attacked by some of these criminal organisations. And again, we'll get Tara to give us an overview of what some of those key things are. And on the ScreenSmarts.online website, you'll basically see the emergency contacts that you need to contact and what you need to go through. There's an amount of legislation coming through. I just read something this morning about there's going to be fines levied to Australian businesses that don't report particular types of attacks, the federal government's new sort of cybersecurity centre. So there are implications in terms of fines and costs for not alerting the authorities, not to mention the sorts of things to do to quickly get your defences strengthened up. Protecting children online. So we'll have Sarah talk about that, particularly with a focus on younger children. It's a really big topic. There's just substantial research now, particularly amongst the impact on younger children of developing levels of addiction in terms of to their devices, and then depending on what they're getting addicted to and who's behind them and how they make money, there are some pretty serious consequences if we just leave it to the kids to sort out rather than as parents getting involved. The other couple of areas that relate to sort of family members, which is really on Screen Smarts, is then the challenges around teenagers and young adults as another subgroup of the family area, and then also senior citizens and the challenges that, in my case, my father recently had and other elderly relatives have in terms of the criminal online activity. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about Screen Smarts Online.
Thanks so much for inviting me along. And hi, everyone. Great to have you on the webinar. As Bill said, I'm Laura Hartley. I'm from NAB. I lead our group security, culture, and advisory team, which is responsible for making sure our people, our customers, and the community know how to keep themselves safe online. And why we're here today is because cybersecurity, as Bill has shared with us, is a problem that unfortunately isn't going away. And that's why we think it's really important to share these messages with all kinds of groups, including small businesses. And what we're seeing is when we look at the data, and this data has come from the ACCC and also the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, which is the government, the problem isn't getting any smaller. So one of the things that we look at, which might appear shortly on the slide, if Bill clicks a couple of times for me, the government looks at how often is a cyber issue reported to them. And it's that number down the bottom. And it used to be that it was every 12 minutes. That was a couple of years ago. Every year when a new report comes out, that number gets smaller and smaller. And I think I saw that reports are up about 20% on last year to the government in terms of cyber issues. So this issue isn't going away. And one that will be front and center for all of you is that loss for small to medium businesses. For medium businesses, it's now up to $100,000 after a cyber incident. Keep in mind that's only when these are reported, and that's only probably pure financial loss. But if you think about if this has happened to you or someone you know, there's often lots of other expenses and disruptions that certainly have a financial impact that may have not been included in that number. So we would expect that the actual financial cost to your business of some kind of cyber event would be much more than that 100,000, which is already a lot of money, of course. And it's up 10% even on last year. So this problem isn't going away. And the reason that my team exists is that one on the top right, that still 70% of data breaches or breaches, cyber breaches, have a person involved. And that's because computer systems are great. You can teach them to look for things and alarms can go off if things go wrong. But we know people aren't that logical, for better or for worse. And that's why my team exists, to be able to come out and talk to people and say, these are the things that you need to look for, because criminals are trying to socially engineer people into handing over information and clicking on links. But I really believe that our job is to train people to be our human firewall or our first line of defense to stop those attacks from happening in the first place. So that's what we're going to try and do today, is equip you with some of the threats that we're seeing, but also how you can protect yourself against them. And when we think about who cyber criminals are, and certainly if you look in the media, it's very much the image on the left. It's the kid in mum's basement wearing the hoodie, eating the pizza. And sometimes that's right. We do see some lone wolf kind of figures that aren't very sophisticated. But mostly what we see now is on the right. It's the crime gang for hire. You can hire an entire call center office of workers ready to go to point at your target as a cyber criminal. And it's really fascinating. They run like any other business. They're highly organized. And the reason they're that organized is because it makes financial sense for them to do so. Just as people working in a business, you probably are highly organized. Criminals want to maximize their profits and their logistics as well. So they're going to operate in that organized fashion too. And we find they have graduate programs. They hire graphic designers. They get bonuses. They're probably working from home at the moment. And they run like that because, like I said, it makes financial sense for them to do so. So that's the that's the sophistication of cyber criminal that NAB faces into every day as a major bank, and with the words National Australia and Bank in our title gets a bit of attention. But unfortunately, as small and medium businesses, that's the kind of threat that you face into every day as well. So it's not really the unsophisticated person on the left that we've touched on. It's more this really sophisticated group on the right. But that's what we're going to talk about as we go through the session today. And so these are the threats that we are seeing our business owners experiencing, and we'll take you through these as we go today. So number one is phishing, and I'll touch more on that in a moment. And I've got an example for you. Ransomware and malware, we'll talk through those in a moment as well, but I'm sure they're terms that you've heard of, even if you don't completely understand them, and we'll talk about that. And then I have an example of business email compromise to show you, and then we'll talk about remote work as well. So being a bank, as I said, criminals do love to try and impersonate NAB's brand. Here is a classic NAB branded phishing email. So we use the analogy of fishing, cast the net out wide, see what you can reel in and catch. And I think we can agree this is actually a pretty good phishing email. There are some things on here that are green flags. The branding's good. NAB's brand team would be pretty happy with this, I think. It's pretty well written, but it's not been sent from a NAB email address. You can see at the top, it's come from eperez@crwpr.com. That's definitely not nab.com.au. There's no greeting. It doesn't say, hi, Laura. It just says hello. So they don't know who I am. Of course, the classic thing about phishing is it's asking for personal information. So this one here is saying, we've suspended your account until you can provide us information. And it's to ensure the security of my account, which is lovely. And once I click that big button that says verify my identity, they'll be happy to unsuspend my account for me. So that's really classic with phishing, that they're going to want you to click on something and provide information. And they're trying to harness that emotional reaction that people will have. Where if I take a step back and maybe if I turn to my friend Bill and I ask him, hey, have you seen this? Does this look right to you? He can objectively, because he's not involved, help me point out some of those red flags that we've talked about. Often people will click on that link just to see where it goes because they're not sure. But by doing so, I might infect my computer with a virus just by clicking. So what we advise instead is for people to hover over the link. And you can see if I did that here, it takes me to tiny.ie, which is a URL shortener service. It makes it really hard to know where that link is going. But you can rest assured NAB doesn't use anything like that. And it's really obvious now we're not going to nab.com.au. And now I know not to go any further. So hover over the link and have a look before you click, and it will help you decide whether you should go forth or not. If I clicked on a link like that, it might infect my computer with malicious software. So sometimes malicious software is called a computer virus. And so that's where criminals might try and infect your computer with a virus, and it might be to steal information. It might be just to annoy you, or it might be so they can take that information and sell it on the dark web, or it might be to get inside your bank accounts and be able to make transactions on your behalf. We see all of those scenarios. Might also be a very specific type of malware called ransomware, which has been in the news a lot the last few years. That's a type of malicious software. When it gets into your computer, it will lock the files in there and demands a ransom for their return. And as you can imagine, as a business, if your computers were unusable, that would be a huge disruption to your business. And we see this happen a lot, and it can go out of business if they haven't protected themselves well. Criminals want to make it really easy for you to pay the ransom so you can get back online and start working again safely. But the official government advice is not to pay the ransom. It's only encouraging criminals. And maybe a bit later on, we'll talk about all the things that you can do to best protect yourself so that you don't even have to consider paying the ransom. It's definitely one of those times where prevention is absolutely better than cure. Moving on to look at another type of threat. This is very common. This is called business email compromise or an email scam. And as you can see, it cost Australians almost $100 million in 2023. They're just the cases that have been reported to us. And what we always tell our customers is that protecting your business email as a small or medium business is actually one of the most important things that you can do. And SMBs often say to us, oh, I don't have anything important in my business email. I don't need to protect it. It's fine if someone gets in there. And look, I understand the sentiment, but if you stop and think for a second about what's in your business email, if I think about what's in mine, you probably have information about product offerings coming up. You have information maybe about your team. That might be salary information, health information, performance records. You'll have a list of your customers. You'll have invoices that you want to send out and that you want to be paid as well. All of that information is really valuable to criminals. They might hold it to ransom, like we've just talked about, or they might try and sell it to one of your competitors. So protecting you from those things happening is really important. And how do people get into your business email? Well, here's a classic example. So it might be an email like this that looks like it comes from someone you know and are working with that's had their email compromised already. So it really is a bit of a chain reaction. But you might receive an email like this from someone you know who's had their email accounts compromised. And it might look like it really comes from Dropbox, but when you click on the link, it downloads malicious software onto your computer, or in this case, it will bring up a really good Microsoft themed phishing site like this one. So if I go to click on that link, I'm thinking I'm downloading a file, but now I have to sign into Microsoft. And a lot of people will see this kind of login screen and very happily put in their email account address and their password without realizing they're giving those details straight to a criminal. And once I have those things about you, I'm inside your business email. And from there, I can do all kinds of things, one of which I'll show you in one moment. So I hope that's really demonstrated, A, how easy it is for criminals to get into your business account and how important it is to protect it. The good news is it's easy to protect your business email account. In addition to watching out for phishing emails like this one, we can turn on multi-factor authentication. And what that means is it's adding another layer of security to your account. So even if someone has my password because I've put it in a phishing site, it's been exposed in a data breach, whatever, someone can't get into my account unless they have that second factor of authentication. And what that can be is my PIN at the ATM in addition to my card. It might be a biometric, so a voice print, face print, thumbprint, or it might be a security code that's sent to my phone or an authenticator app. It doesn't really matter which of those it is. It's just important that you have multi-factor authentication, or MFA, turned on everywhere that you can. Sometimes it's called 2FA as well, two-factor authentication, just to complicate things. Here's a real example for you. So, excuse me, Josh is buying a house. He's very excited. He's been talking to Barry, his conveyancer. This email is all above board. So Barry wants Josh to pay the deposit into a trust account. This is all above board, no problems here. What Barry doesn't realize, Barry's email has been compromised. The fraudster is sitting in Barry's email, watching their conversation, waiting for that first legitimate email to go out. 30 seconds later, they can follow up with this. Whoops, sorry, wrong bank account details, pay the money here instead. We see this happen all the time. And this is one place where law firms, conveyancers, they're often targeted with these kind of emails, as well as schools, especially if they have construction going on, and then consumers as personal banking customers as well. So unfortunately, we hear about this happen every day of the week. And it's one of those things, we don't want to see this happen to anyone. And once that money is sent, often it is gone for good. And people ask me, what technology can they buy to stop this from happening? The great answer is you don't need to buy anything. It's business process. It's a 30-second phone call to call the person who's asking for the money. It's a 30-second phone call to call the person asking for the money on a number that you trust to make sure that you're really sending it where you should be sending it. So in this case, Josh would call Barry on his phone number on his website or the number they've been talking on and say, hey, did you send me that email with the change of bank account details? Barry is going to say no. But just to call out, there's no point replying to the email because we've got to assume the email's been compromised. We don't really trust email that much, to be honest. We want to make a separate out-of-band validation contact. So that kind of 30-second phone call could save you an entire house deposit and a whole lot of stress as well.
So thank you, Laura. And I might just share a story. My 80-year-old father recently went to log into his personal computer and up came this message on the screen that looked like it was from Telstra. He's still got a big Pond email address, believe it or not, but it looked like it was from Telstra. And it basically said, look, sorry, we've detected that your computer's been affected. Our technicians are working on it at the moment. Please call the following phone number so that we can confirm who you are and then unlock the computer. Looked very legitimate. So step one, effectively some malware has been dropped on that computer that's taken control of it. So he's quite probably clicked on a link in some email or something he's got through the virus scanner in the past. So then he's got his phone and he's literally ringing up Telstra. And then someone answers it from the Telstra, security alert center, walks through the whole story and, showed him that they've got a couple of things that they'd reactivated for him. Great. Now, the last couple of things they need to do to get rid of the bad software and give him back full control. Now they just need to know, his date of birth. Did he have a password for the telephone access, credit card details? And he just started feeling sick in the stomach and hung up. But in that case, it was a combination of, some malware being dropped, taking control, and then sort of phishing that wasn't just via the screen, but from the screen with a fake phone number to a fake call center. So I think that just reinforces your point around, well-organized criminal activities that are very, very good at what they do. And, we have a significant incidence among senior citizens and sort of elderly people of being very much targeted and taken advantage of with respect to that stuff.
Thank you, Bill. And thanks for sharing your story. That's pretty scary. And your presentation was wonderful, Laura. A lot of eye-opening slides and scenarios there that you presented. and I am very pleased to be a part of this panel and be contributing to the discussions today alongside our wonderful panel delegates here. As Bill mentioned before, I'm Tara Dhanikota, and I'm the head of Information Security Management. I oversee security management and governance, awareness, education, and culture, as well as the overall security business partnership within PEXA. So we've all come back after COVID, and specifically, there's been a tremendous shift to remote work. And unfortunately, many of the businesses are unknowingly using insecure home and public Wi-Fi networks. And that makes us vulnerable to cyber attacks. How many of us have actually connected to a free Wi-Fi at a cafe or airport? And if you haven't heard the story, there was a man from Perth who was recently arrested over claims that he set up an evil twin Wi-Fi network on a plane journey. And because it looked very much like the airport access point, a lot of staff as well as users were confused when they saw the suspicious free network. And it was quite identical to the one that was offered by the airline. So you've got to be very careful, because if you're connecting to a free Wi-Fi, cyber criminals love that too. It's a bit like leaving your house door wide open, right? Because what happens is the cyber criminals use these open networks to get into your laptop or your network and intercept that business data and steal valuable information. And even your home Wi-Fi network could be busy, could be risky, because if it is not protected by a strong password, it can prove to be potentially an easy target for cyber criminals. And public Wi-Fi is also especially dangerous because anyone on the same network that you join, like you saw before, the evil twin, they could potentially gain access to all that sensitive business information that you have residing on your laptops. So what can you do? You've got to make sure that you are protecting your home Wi-Fi with a strong password and a strong encryption. We'll talk more about this in the oncoming slides. And the second thing I would like to emphasize here is also for you to avoid using any public Wi-Fi, especially for those business tasks that you work on your laptop. But if you must use a Wi-Fi, you could consider using a VPN to encrypt your connection, or you could use your mobile phone to tether onto the same network. And strengthening your business defenses doesn't necessarily require a large IT team or a huge budget from you. There are some simple steps you can use to protect yourself from these kind of attacks, right? Sorry, I'm clicking too quickly here. And bringing out the analogy again, think of cybersecurity like locking off your doors and windows of your house, because you wouldn't leave them open for anyone to walk in, would you? So similarly, we need to protect our digital environment as well. And using the unique passwords is very important for every account. Laura emphasized quite a bit on using a two-factor authentication. And what I would also like to emphasize is don't use the same passwords for your email accounts, your banking accounts, your business accounts. Why? Because if a hacker gets access to one password, you don't want them to get access to everything. And what Iranian-based cyber attacks have recently been doing is they are compromising critical infrastructure networks using brute force attacks. So brute force attacks are more like password spraying, where once they know a password that belongs to you, they're going to use the same password and the same email address across several different domains or websites. And they're going to try and get your password and your account information. And that's why multi-factor authentication is quite important. But one thing to remember with MFA is not give away that MFA code to the cyber criminals themselves. what the cyber criminals are doing is something called push bombing. And push bombing is they bombard you with so many two-factor authentication type of messages that you eventually get frustrated and you click on one of them, and hence that'll give them access to the 2FA code as well. So that's something to be mindful of. Regular backups is also very important. And do your backups quite regularly, because if your system is compromised by a ransomware or hardware failure, you can restore everything without paying a ransom or losing your business data. And Bill was talking about the new cybersecurity bill that was passed through recently. And what that says is don't pay a ransom. If you are paying a ransom, you are required to report that ransom payment to the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. So do not pay a ransom, because you are not going to be sure that you'll get your data back. And they might eventually end up posting it on a third-party deep dark web site for the other hackers to download as well. So very important to remember that. We spoke about secure Wi-Fi networks earlier. We'll touch on it a bit more in the later slides. One more thing to remember is security awareness training. And we spoke about data backups already. So security awareness training is something that if you are more than a one-person business, it's important to keep in mind that you've got to be careful about the phishing mails that come in. And hence you can do a simulation type of activity, mock phishing emails that you can send to the rest of the team. If you're a big enough team, even if you're a small team, you can still be able to do that. There are products that you can use, or you can create your own mock-up email and send it, just so you know how many are clicking, how many are not clicking. If they're clicking, they might need a bit more education on why they shouldn't be clicking on those. It prepares them for real-life threat scenarios as well. And restricting access to sensitive data. Not everybody in the business needs access to sensitive data, especially if you're more than a one-person team. Keep that restricted access to key people in your company. And this limits the risk of exposure as well as errors within the business itself. So if I were to give you one tip here, is for you to start enabling your MFA on your email and banking accounts if it's not already turned on. We're going over to I'm going to talk about the incident response plan in a little while as well. And security doesn't stop at the office, because your mobile devices and home networks are also equally important for you to protect. When you think of your phone as a portable office, you wouldn't leave your office without locking it. So don't leave your phone and your home network unsecured either. And public Wi-Fi networks, we were talking about it earlier. While it is quite convenient to use, it can often be unsecured because you don't know who is creating that access point, like the evil twin network that was created. And it could be a big hotspot for hackers. So instead of using your public Wi-Fi, try using your mobile data or even a personal hotspot when working outside your office, because that's going to be very helpful. You know that the connection is secure when you use your own mobile phone to tether. And this makes it much harder for cyber criminals to intercept your data as well. We are also going to talk about home Wi-Fi, because if you're going to change, if you're not going to change the default password on your home Wi-Fi router as soon as you set it up, cyber criminals can actually guess the default passwords, because the default passwords are available on the internet. So make sure it also uses a strong encryption like WPA2 or WPA3, and that is much more secure than the older options. And if you have guests or other clients that are coming into your office, it's also a good idea to set up a different account for them and give them a different password so they can still use the same connection. Or if you want them to use a separate connection, that is great as well. You can probably purchase a smaller connection for them, smaller fee connection for them, and set it up if they were going to use that segregates your Office connection where you transact with business data from the other connections that come in through customers or clients or anyone coming in, guests coming into your office as well. So if you're using your mobile devices, make sure you have a strong password or PIN on it, and it's set to auto lock, because even if you forget to lock it, it gets locked automatically. And not just that, it saves the power on your mobile device. And if you're installing any apps, make sure you install it from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, because you know that they are legitimate and genuine. And a quick win here is to check your router security settings. If you haven't changed the default password, do it as soon as you can, because that's important. So let's talk about things that you can do to protect yourself and make yourself more secure. Nobody expects a cyber attack, but when it happens, being prepared is definitely going to help reduce the damage and get your business back on track. When you think of it, it's like a fire drill for your business. Knowing what to do when there is a cyber attack can actually save your business. So being prepared is key over here. And if your business experiences a cyber attack at some point in the most unfortunate circumstances, the first thing you can do is to report it to the authorities. And in Australia, we have the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, ACSC. And if it involves theft or fraud, you could also report it or notify the local law enforcement. And this will ensure that you're taking the right steps to help protect your business and potentially also recover any lost assets. There are several different websites that help you, and Bill is going to talk at the end about the ScreenSmart website, and that also has a lot of information that'll direct you to the necessary websites for you so you can get more information on things like this. The next step is for you to figure out what systems or data have been compromised and isolate any of those affected systems immediately, because this step will prevent the attack from spreading to the other parts of your network. The third step here is about transparency, and transparency is key. If you have any employees in your company or any customers that have been affected by an incident, you should inform them promptly. They will appreciate the transparency, and it also helps you manage the impact of your business reputation. The next few steps talk about recovery measures. Change all the passwords for affected accounts immediately. And remember, we spoke about backups. They will come in handy for you to restore the systems if necessary. And this is why having those regular backups is so important. And after the incident, what you can do is conduct a thorough audit of your security practices. There are resources from cyber.gov.au or ScreenSmart or the small business website as well, and identify where the weaknesses are and work on strengthening those weaknesses. Again, one key thing here is if you've got employees, employee training is also a good practice, just in case they click on something that they shouldn't or do any practices that are not the best to secure your defenses. And the last point here is for you not to be afraid to reach out for help. There are a lot of professional services and resources available, like there's cybersecurity consultants, the government programs, and they can all help you recover from the attack and also better protect your businesses in future. And if I were to give you one actionable tip, is the best time to prepare is before an attack happens. Take a moment to think about your incident response plan. So this is a plan that you can have beforehand with all the necessary resources, all the necessary things and steps that you can take in case there is an attack. And if you don't have one, it's definitely worth creating a simple guide for yourself, your business, as well as a team if you have one. And you don't have to be a tech expert to protect your small business. Taking those small practical steps sometimes, like setting up strong passwords, enabling MFA, securing your Wi-Fi, can make a huge difference. And remember, cybersecurity attacks can happen to anybody, you, me, anyone. But being prepared can minimize the impact on our businesses. Again, I'm going to emphasize one thing today is to enable multi-factor authentication and ensure you have a good backup of your data. These are simple actions, but they can protect you from some of the biggest cyber threats out there. So I'm going to stop here and thank you for the time and pass it over to Bill.
Thank you very much, Tara. That was incredibly informative. And one of our partners at Small Business Australia is Microsoft. So it's the biggest of our strategic partners. And I remember having a conversation with them about this whole area. And I said, look, if there's one thing, what's the one thing? And both you and Laura have mentioned the one thing being multi-factor authentication, MFA. And it's not just in some cases 2FA, like two-factor, but multi. I think both of you have highlighted the importance of that and getting it in place with every website that you interface with where it's been enabled. To the extent that it may not have been enabled, that may be a bit of a warning sign around in interacting with that website. Are they taking and providing the maximum security measures to do that for you? And I think what Laura talked about gave an example of a email being intercepted from a conveyancer and then someone being provided with a fake email and the wrong bank account. I think one of the great initiatives and innovations of PEXA is something called the PEXA key, which ensures that the communications that take place between a conveyancer and lawyer and their clients, is in a fully secured, encrypted, super strong environment rather than relying on emails. And just to share another very brief story, a friend of my daughter's got married recently, and her husband runs a home security business of all things. And he's out and about setting up security systems and cameras and all of that sort of stuff. And he was sharing a story with me after they got back from their honeymoon where he was away and on his laptop and organising to send an invoice to one of his clients. So it had been $3,500 project, I think $1,500 or so with equipment, a couple of $1,000s of labour. And sent it off and hadn't been paid within the 3 or 4 weeks. Found that a bit surprising. Followed up with his customer and I said, well, what do you mean? Like, we've paid you. And so in that case, his invoice had been intercepted and kept exactly the same, but the bank account details changed. And that customer has legitimately paid into the criminal's bank account payment for those services. And one thing I'd like to point out to everybody, because it's not well named, but the awareness is very low, is if you go to the Australian Tax Office website, they have a service which they call e-invoicing. And it's part of a global standard for maximising security around how suppliers ask to be paid and how customers pay suppliers. So it's very much a business-to-business type infrastructure. But when we've done research with many business owners and asked them whether they use e-invoicing, they say yes, but in fact, they're not using that. What they're doing is generating, in some cases, an invoice out of their accounting software, or Microsoft Word or a PDF, and attaching an invoice. So it is an electronic invoice, but they're attaching it to an email and leaving themselves wide open to this type of invoice fraud that's taking place on a growing scale. So I'd encourage everyone to go to the ATO's website. And what they mean by e-invoicing is not the way many of us perceive it. But a question I might just ask you, Tara, one that's come in is around VPNs, and it's been mentioned a couple of times. Could you explain to us, in plain language, sort of what a VPN is? And if I go to a free Wi-Fi hotspot and connect up through that and then activate the VPN, will all my data be protected, or am I exposed to that evil twin in terms of the information flowing between my device and that hotspot before it then connects to the VPN?
Yeah, no, this is a very interesting question. Thank you for that. Now, VPN is more like a virtual private network that acts as a barrier between your laptop and the internet. So if you are connecting to something like an evil twin, in this case, your data will still be encrypted by the VPN. So the cyber criminals, even if they have an access point that is not legitimate, it can't siphon a lot of information from your laptop itself, because a VPN is going to make it all private and encrypt the data on your laptop. But having said that, it is also a really good idea to choose the right VPN, because a lot of VPNs are known to to store some of the information from your laptop or from the users themselves. It may not be all the information, and that's what you need to find out. So if you are purchasing a VPN, make sure you understand what their fine print is, what their terms and conditions are, and how much data they might be storing that belongs to you. The best way to proceed with hotspots and connecting to them is at least to have a mobile phone with data with you, so you can tether onto the phone instead of to the hotspot or the public Wi-Fi. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Fantastic. Well, and again, thank you, Tara. We might now move on to something that all of us as parents, are quite concerned about, which is protecting children with respect to, their online activity. And so I'd like to now invite Sarah to take us through, some thoughts on this critical area in terms of where, again, there are significant risks, but things that parents and grown-ups can do, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Laura and Tara. That's it's been really interesting listening to the kind of risks that you raise and the kinds of things that we can all do. So really, really helpful information there. I'm Sarah Mercer. I'm the Chief Design Officer at Play Lunch Games. I've been making games for children now for more years than I care to count. And for government, schools, TAFEs, university, not-for-profit and corporate sectors. So I'll just go through similar kinds of issues that have been raised by Laura and Tara. But of course, when it's a child, you've got that extension of you're worried about them, but they're going to be able to do things beyond your own control, and how can you manage that? So when we're thinking about children, I've roughly grouped this into younger children. Generally primary school age, you'll have kids going on devices from very, very young through to about the end of primary school, and they will generally have interests that are a little bit less wide. And then you've got older children, 12 years and up, who are generally starting to step further out into the world, and maybe some more of that risk-taking behavior on their own rather than the exposure sorts of concerns that you have with the younger kids. So I'll just talk through some of the risks that we see for children in these groups. Broadly speaking, we think about the risks as being content, contact, and behavior. So if you're thinking about content risks for younger children, that's really any kinds of images or video or any of those sorts of things that they might find upsetting or that might make them uncomfortable. That could be completely legal, but might not be appropriate for them to see, right through to the kinds of very inappropriate kind of content. Whoops, we've just skipped forward there. There we go. Then there's contact risks. So partly, the biggest risk there is adults posing as children and using text or voice or video to contact them, or particularly for younger kids trying to obtain images and videos. And then there's the behavioral risks, and that's behavior that your child might engage with. That could be things like being cyberbullied, or there's also, of course, the risk that your own child may engage in behavior that can be bullying. That could be purchasing behaviors. It's very easy nowadays to allow a child to click something and not realize that they've, they won't necessarily realize what they've done. And it can include agreements that they could click on without quite realizing what they're clicking on. And then there's the data collection risks that we're all concerned about for all of us, particularly for kids. For the older age group, you're dealing with those kinds of same kinds of risks, but you're also starting to extend that out. So for content risks, you increasingly see for older kids an attempt to shock or an attempt to invite self-harm. Those are the kinds of content risks that can happen. For contact risks, you're particularly extending to impersonators who are trying to get information such as location and set up meetings with obvious bad intent there, or even financial information, because of course from about 12 to 14, kids are starting to have access to bank accounts. So you're starting to see similar sorts of extensions there. And then there's the behavioral risks, which we've noted there on the screen. So sexting, sextortion, the kinds of reputational damage that can come with sextortion, that sense of shame, and additional financial risks, or indeed data risks that can lead to the same kinds of ID thefts and consequences that Tara and Laura have already been talking about. So obviously there's a lot to worry about there, and we all worry about these sorts of things. So there's a few things that you can do, and this is the good news. There are some things that you can do for both of those kinds of age groups. And so for kids, I think the really important thing to be thinking about across the board is being informed. So exactly the same kinds of things that we're talking about here is understanding what those risks are and what they can be, and then taking the steps to set that up. But it's also about educating your children, using child-friendly language to get them to understand that there are risks, the same as there are getting outside, you know, road safety, getting into people's cars, all that stranger danger kind of stuff. You just need to extend those kinds of conversations to the same kinds of things in the sense of what's happening out there on the internet. There are tactics that you can use, such as parental controls for younger kids on your devices. We've provided the eSafety Commissioner's site has some quite good information, both in general terms and in very specific terms, that will step you through exactly what you have to do on devices for this kind of safety. And we've provided some of those links on the website that Bill will be referring to later. For younger children, we would encourage you to go online with your child and talk to them about what they're doing, understand what they're doing. For older kids, just to encourage that kind of conversation about where they're going and what they're doing. And really importantly, encourage them to feel that they can tell you whatever else they've been doing. It's really important. It's kind of like that multi-factor protection in that sense, is that they've got someone that they can talk to if they've come across something, or indeed they've engaged in some kind of behavior that they know was kind of wrong. That's risk-taking behavior that the older children will tend to engage with. They just need to feel confident that even when they've done something that wasn't such a great idea, that if something happens to them, they can still talk to you about it and they can feel safe to discuss it with you. And I think an important part of that too is, particularly when we're thinking about screen time, all the great tips that Laura and Tara have provided here, not just doing those, but showing your kids that you're doing those things. So having that opportunity to talk to them about that and modeling that kind of behavior yourself. So showing them that you're using multi-factor authentication, all of those kinds of things, help them understand the kinds of risks that are out there, but also what kinds of things they can be doing to be asking those sorts of questions. Generally, it's really tempting as a parent to put lots of things on your devices to try and prevent particularly older children from doing things you don't want them to do. We generally would suggest, or the general advice is to avoid those kinds of things and encourage talk, because at the point that a child feels that you are trying to not let them do something, and then they take that risk to do it, if something bad happens, they may feel less confident that they can come and talk to you about it. So that's where we would generally say, try to keep those conversations as open as possible. And that's the advice across the board, is just keep the conversations going. Try to understand as much as you can about what they're doing. And yeah, the tools. So we mentioned parental device settings. There are also some good ways that you can find quality content out there. We've got some websites that we can point you to on the Screen Smart site. But there are some ways that you can find. There are designers like us that are really looking for ways to make really good quality content and avoid all these kinds of risks, and you can find that kind of content out there. There are also messaging apps, particularly child-friendly messaging apps that you can use that will have the same kinds of protections that we've talked about here that will help avoid those kinds of risks. And yeah, encourage, as you're learning about these kinds of things, encourage your own children to turn off one-click purchasing, for example, so they don't get excited to go down that path, and to encourage them to use the same kinds of privacy settings on their devices as they start to get their own devices. And of course, one of the things that everybody is concerned about, again, particularly with young children, is screen time. As we have mentioned before, there are good quality content out there. Is good quality content out there. All of us probably have to worry about how much time we spend on screens these days. But the reality is that screens are increasingly a part of our lives. We use them for banking. We use them for business. There's so much of what we do. Understanding how to find the good stuff and going out and looking for it is an important part of that. So you can have a look at some of the resources that Bill's provided. It's really useful to set clear guidelines for your kids about which screens, bearing in mind it's not just their own devices, but the TV, the other devices you've got around the house that they could be using. So having some, if you're worried about kids spending too much time on screens, you can set up a digital plan with your kids about how we're going to use screens, when we're going to use screens, when we're going to do something else. And the key thing there is making it about managing that time across all your activities. One of the analogies that gets used is that you wouldn't spend all day in the pool. You don't spend all day doing any one thing. It's not a useful thing. If you spent all day in the pool, you'd end up pretty wrinkled and probably pretty sunburnt as well. It ain't healthy. So the same way as spending too much time doing any one activity is the same as spending too much time on the screens. And again, model that with your own behavior is always the tip. If you feel that you're spending a bit too much time on the screen, then that's something to talk to the kids about as well. And maybe see if there are ways that you can set your own limits and show them how you manage that kind of thing. So I think that covers most of the things that I wanted to cover here. Bill, probably the tip here is to have a look at some of the great content that we've all shared on the Screen Smarts website.
Thanks very much for that, Sarah. I know it's a great concern for many parents around, you know, the amount of time being spent on screens. But of course, it's not just the amount of time, but it's like what's actually taking place on that screen. And you know, it's increasingly, you know, key skills that all of us need to have. And in the same way that, you know, we have children, you know, learn appropriate behaviour with respect to getting out of cars, and those sorts of things when they learn to drive. There's a big opportunity for us to help them, you know, learn to surf with respect to using their screens. And you know, I really, you know, congratulate, you know, you and the team at Play Lunch Games around the steps you're taking with what you've been designing, you know, so that parents can have, you know, significant peace of mind that there's fun and learning taking place and no cyberbullying and no ability to do any messaging, no ability for any grooming and some of the things that unfortunately are happening on some games that look like they're pretty good, but in fact are wide open in terms of criminal behaviour. So thank you very much for that. And what I might do now is I'll just go to my last slide and I'll stop sharing and we'll get into the questions. So, you know, everyone's mentioned, and thank you, ladies, Screen Smarts online. So that's the URL. It's pretty simple. That's the homepage. But if you get there, you'll find information around protecting yourself, protecting your business if you're a business owner, and protecting your family, and around those sort of three segments or groups of family members, from the young children to the teenager to young adults, through to the more elderly relatives and senior citizens. Then there's an area that's actually got the emergency contacts, what to do, and then access to a whole bunch of resources, you know, including effectively some office posters that you can download or, you know, and print them out, print them off. You know, in some cases, I think, you know, becoming so reliant on screens, we miss out on the value of every now and then having something on a mouse mat or printed out on the wall. If you think about the steps you might have in your workplace around occupational health and safety, I'd encourage you to use similar approaches for, you know, reminding everyone, keeping it front of mind around screen safety. And so Screen Smarts has got access to those and links to other resources, including free training. So in terms of some more specific training to better identify phishing scams and things, I encourage you to get over and have a look at it and share it with anyone and everyone with respect to helping. As I said, we're coming into summer and we're going to be sun smart. We're on our screens every day. We need to get screen smarter, and we'll all benefit from that. Look, I'd like to stop sharing now, and in some time that we've got left, and I know that Tara, you may have to head off for another commitment that you've got, and if you do that, please leave. But thank you very much for your contribution. And I've asked the question about the VPN. We've got one here which is around what WEP, WPA, or WPA2 actually means. Perhaps Tara, before you go, you could share with us, what those things mean.
Absolutely. So I meant to type an answer there, but I accidentally clicked on answer live, but it's worked out well. So they are the protocols or the way that the router communicates to give you the internet connection. And WEP, WPA, WPA2, 3, they are all the oldest to the newest protocols. So WEP is the oldest, WPA3 is the newest. And what they do is they prevent any unauthorized access, so the access that's not meant to be there as part of your network. And they also prevent people listening in and snooping onto your wireless network, because there are a lot of people, they can drive past and stand there, their devices which work out what access points are available in a certain hotspot, and they can access that network. What they do is they see if it's using a default password and try and enter that password and see if they can get into the network. So if you're using a new protocol, it's going to prevent eavesdropping. So obviously you need to change the default password to a stronger password, because that also prevents the hackers or cyber criminals from getting into your network easily.
Thank you very much for that. So a question for you, Laura, about passwords, because I know you were sharing with me some interesting statistics about the most common passwords that are out there being used. Could you comment on that briefly for us?
Absolutely. So every year, security researchers release the most common passwords that were exposed in data breaches. And unfortunately, there's never any surprises on that list for us. It's always password 1234, admin 12345678 and QWERTY, which is the top line of the keyboard on the left. So they're all the passwords that you would expect. But the problem is they're also the first passwords criminals will try when they try to get into your account. So it's really important not to use those things as passwords. And if they've been set as the default, as Tara said, to change them, because we don't want to make it that easy for criminals to get into our accounts. So we really recommend people use a password safe tool. We know it's hard to remember passwords. People have about 300 of them they need to remember for all their online accounts. It's not possible. So download a password safe tool. There's lots of good free ones. It's a secure vault. It can store all your passwords for you. You only need one good password you need to remember to come and go. And then all your other passwords can be saved inside there. They can be unique, which is important, and complex, but you don't have to remember them. So it's very liberating. I can't recommend one password safe tool in particular, but there's lots out there like LastPass, Dashlane. If you Google top 5 password safes, you'll find some good options.
Well, while we've got particularly Tara still here as well, perhaps you could tell us, Laura, which one do you personally use? And then Tara, which one do you use? I know you're not recommending them, but as they sort of say, the toothpaste that more dentists use, we never get to see the face of who the dentist is, but if you share with us, because I want to know which one I should be going and researching and looking at, and I'm very happy to pay for it. What are you using, Laura?
I personally use LastPass.
LastPass. And what about you, Tara?
So I also use LastPass, because even though they've had breaches in the past, they've gone ahead and made sure it's a bit more secure. A combination of LastPass and Google Passkeys. So Google's introduced Passkeys as well. And that seems to be a good tool because most of us have Gmail accounts.
Well, just so while you're still there, could you just explain to us what a passkey is? Because it's been popping up and they've been asking me to do it recently, Google. And given we've got an expert like you there, Tara, what is a passkey?
Yeah, so if you take the word passkeys itself, it could mean complex characters within the password. But the way Google's introduced the Google Passkeys is you don't necessarily have to log in using your password each time. So when you're trying to log into your Gmail, for example, it prompts you on a device that's attached to your Gmail for you to verify. So it's like a multi-factor authentication mechanism as well. So that can be a good thing. One more thing while I'm there, if I can recommend, is having an authenticator app. Again, I'm not recommending any specific authenticator app, but I use the app called Authenticator. It's really good. That acts as your MFA because it's a bit more secure than people sending you a code as an SMS, because as you know, there's push bombing that the cyber criminals can use to get your two-factor authentication code. So a good way for you to use the MFA is to go to the app, type in the numbers that you see, that the numbers change every 30 or 60 seconds, depending on the app itself.
Fantastic. We've got a couple of other questions here. So Lisa has asked about 1Password, which I'm assuming is a brand name of a password app. Does anyone have a point of view about 1Password? And let me say, we're not providing advice here at Small Business Australia, financial advice, IT advice, but this is a general education exercise. Have you heard of 1Password, Tara?
Yes, it is another password safe tool that is available.
Okay.
Yeah,
right, thank you. Very good answer from the bank.
A very quick answer. Good one, Laura. Just to add to that, again, password managers have several different features. Some store the passwords on the cloud, the others store it on your local desktop. So if you're not a big fan of cloud or someone else's computer, as you call it, saving those passwords, then you can use something called KeyPass even that saves all your passwords in your local computer or local storage. But the convenience is obviously a little bit lesser compared to the cloud storage ones, because you have to carry KeyPass along with you where you go and put it in the computer that you're using, whereas the cloud ones are available for you readily.
Fantastic. So a question here around people that may be traveling overseas and need to work remotely. I know that I spent a few weeks in the Northern Hemisphere and working across time zones to here. And in my case, I went and got a 5G SIM card and only ever connected directly through the 5G network, which I think might have been T-Mobile in Northern Europe. But any advice, Laura, with respect to for people that are about to travel internationally and have to connect in remotely?
Your volume's not coming through properly, Laura, for some reason.
Yeah, we've lost you again there, Laura, for some, yeah. Try.
Still can't hear, unfortunately.
Well, Tara, I might ask you, Tara, do you have what's your advice for people that are going to be overseas but need to, work remotely?
Yeah, no, definitely. So what I do personally is as soon as I land somewhere, I get a data pack, load my mobile with the data, and then use my mobile to tether to the laptops and then work from there. That's probably the easiest method.
Well, look, I think we might wrap it up. There's a question around, will the recording be made available? Yes, on Monday. We have a number of people that couldn't make it live today, but everyone will receive an email from us with links, a link to the ScreenSmart's website, but it's pretty simple, screensmarts.online, but also a link to where you can find the recording on the Small Business Australia website. There's also a number of past webinar recordings there that you're also able to freely access. I'd like to thank our three panelists today for their time, participation, and sharing their considerable knowledge with us. I'd like to thank both PEXA and NAB again, very important strategic partners of Small Business Australia, as we work hard to both, educate and then, help facilitate small businesses in Australia being more financially sustainable. So I think the analogy for me with all of this is a bit like we're heading into bushfire season now. And again, when you're in the middle of a fire, we don't want to hear about building a fire break. There's a lot of stuff we always do right around this time of the year to make sure the leaves are out of the spouts of the house, that the hoses are set up, that we've got some buckets, that we're ready, in the event that something happens. And, as has been pointed out to us, like these are professional cyber criminal organizations that are coming at us, and they're coming at us, every minute of every day. So now is the time to learn a bit more about how they come at us and to get those fire breaks in place. But again, for Tara, Sarah and Laura, I feel like I'm the odd one off here. Maybe I'll change my name from Bill to Wilma so we can all end in A. But thank you, ladies, for your contribution, your energy and your commitment to helping keep the small business owners, the employees and the parents and their children cyber safe. Thank you very much.